Hey folks, Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and it's finally time to finish up my Wild Beyond the Witchlight coverage. The reason this video has been taking so long is it's ridiculously frustrating for me, and let me explain why. So, if you were to look in Wild Beyond the Witchlight, there are two appendices at the back of the book. There is, I'm going to pull them up here on D&D Beyond just so I make sure I get them correctly. Appendix B is called Factions, and it covers 3 factions found within inside the book. I'll also say this up front, spoilers for Wild Beyond the Witchlight, as we are going to be talking about the creatures and characters involved in them, some of which you already know, like the classic D&D characters from older editions, like Kellic and Strongheart and Warduke and so on. But there's Appendix B is titled Factions. It covers 3 specific factions. The Hourglass Coven, the sort of 3 hags that govern most of the regions you'll be playing through in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. The League of Malevolence, sort of the OG evil D&D characters, and Valor's Call, the sort of OG good characters. And then there's an Appendix C called Creatures, which you would think would cover all of the new monsters in the book. Now, I'm actually looking right here, and I'll show you this. This video, by the way, is going to be on the faction characters, and I'll explain. So if we take a look right here, you can see this is the list of creatures, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 creatures. Some of these have a couple sub-creatures, so call it 20, okay, roughly. Now, if we were to go to D&D Beyond and sort by monsters with the source of Wild Beyond the Witchlight, now we can see, let's take a look. We have, do you see this? Do you see all of these creatures here? There are 4 pages. 4 pages. Now, I will say some of these are from other books, just reprinted. For example, you can see here, right, the Bullywug Royal, the Darkling from Volo's Guide to Monsters. These are reprints that are just found in here. Same thing with, like, the Boggle here, right, being in one of the creature section is a reprint from Volo's Guide. Now, this will have updated stat blocks if there was a stat block to update for it. However, one thing I can say is, look at this. Excuse me, Agden Longscarf, okay? Agden Longscarf is not listed in the factions, and Agden Longscarf is not listed under the creatures. There are a ton of characters, NPCs, and monster stat blocks baked in the book. Now, I've talked about this before, and this bugs me. And I get it, I understand, but it bugs me, okay? This book has done a lot of things that were improvements markedly over previous books like Candlekeep Mysteries and things like that bothered me to my core, which was you gave us an appendices with all the magic items in it. That's great, especially for folks that not necessarily like me, because I do like collecting all the books and in case I want to pull something, but there are people who just want to have the books for the resources they provide, like the new races, the new magic items, the new monsters. So, if that's the case, and I want to buy it for that, I don't want to have to hunt through a 200-something page book to find them. I realize this isn't everybody's cup of tea, and it might be controversial, whatever. You feel how you feel, you're entitled to your opinion, but you have an appendices for the magic items. Then you have an appendices for the factions, and an appendices for the monsters. And I'm like, that's great, that's exactly what I want. If I want to look up a monster, I'll go to the appendices and look up the monster. But you can't. Because a lot of them are baked, they chose arbitrarily some 20 or so monsters to put in the appendices, and then chose probably at almost double that amount. We'll have to keep a tally as we go through in the monster video. But for example, there was one thing I was just flicking through, a flying rocking horse, okay? That sounds like a fun little animated object. There is no stat block in here for the flying rocking horse, but there is a flying rocking horse stat block contained within the adventure as you flip through. So I had originally planned to do an NPC video and a monster video, but it actually turned out to be even more work on my end to separate those things out. So what we're gonna cover here is the faction chapter, which has a handful of NPCs, right? The 3 hags, the League of Malevolence, Valor's Call. We'll cover all of those in this video, and then the next video we'll call, monsters. We'll call this video Factions in Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and we'll call the other one Monsters in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. What we'll do is we'll go through that searched list, and obviously we'll just omit any of the monsters or any of the NPCs we covered in the faction section, but that way we gather the entire list, which is also a PSA for all of you. Don't just look at the monster section in the back of the book, because there's more contained in the if you flip through. So anyway, that's enough of my rant. I will say, hey, if you do like my coverage and where I do take the time to go and look at these things, because it would have been super easy. These videos would have been out weeks ago if all I did was just cover what was contained in the appendices, but I would have missed so much. And I don't like to do that. So I like to make sure I cover everything as in-depth and clearly as possible. So if you like this kind of stuff, whether it be this, D&D, news coverage, story time, which I have 2 D&D stories that I want to do videos on in the future. I have a whole list over here. A lot of you have been asking about more stuff, but I'll cover that at the end of the video, what's coming next. So anyway, let's jump in back over here to the factions. So first up, we have the Hourglass Coven. We know that Prismeer is sort of the main domain of delight, the domain you spend time in Wild Beyond the Witchlight once you transition from the carnival into that world. Now, it is ruled by these 3 hags, Bavlorna Blightstraw, Endolin Moongrave, and Skabatha Nightshade. They are the 3 daughters, or 3, I don't know if she has more, 3 daughters of Baba Yaga, okay? They have taken Prismeer and sort of split it into 3 separate kind of mini domains, if you will, called Hither, Tither, and Yon, and each one kind of rules over each of them, and that covers 3 of the chapters within Wild Beyond the Witchlight. So we do see they do have some shared spells between them. On the rare occasion that they're within 30 feet of each other, they do have access to the following spells: Detect Thoughts, Dispel Magic, Finger of Death, Glibness, Locate Creature, and Mass Suggestion, all with a DC 14. And once they do that, they can't do it again until the next dawn. So then we have, here we'll move into Bavlorna Blightstraw. She's the middle child here. We can see her alignment, and I like this little bits here where they started adding the character-based personality features to all of the major NPCs, so we can see her personality trait, ideal, bond, and flaw. We have a little bit of her appearance, and here she is. She is kind of toad-like in nature, and she rides on that floating lily pad that we covered in the magic item video. So we see she has a weakness here as well. She's allergic to the sight of creatures running counterclockwise in circles, a motion known as running widdershins. Creatures that run widdershins within 10 feet of Bavlorna cause her to lapse into a fit of sneezing. Interesting. All right, let's take a look. So we can see here she is a challenge rating 7 creature. She has pretty sizable saving throws. Decent AC and hit points. She has true sight out to 60 feet. She's amphibious. It kind of deals with the whole frog-like nature. She's immune to any effect that would age her. And here's the Widdershins allergy. If a creature within 10 feet uses at least 10 feet of movement to run in place counterclockwise, she becomes overcome by a fit of sneezing and can't cast spells until the end of her next turn. In addition, any creature Bavlorna has swallowed is immediately expelled and falls prone in an unoccupied space. She is also medium in size, so keep that in mind as far as swallowing things go. But I love this. This is very Feywild and Fey related. This kind of like funky weakness, like running counterclockwise makes her sneeze. That's like so goofy and unique, and I absolutely love it. All right, so she can make 1 bite attack and 1 withering ray. She has her bite, which does some piercing damage, and you're grappled. While you're grappled, you're also restrained. And her withering ray is a 60-foot necrotic beam. She can create Lornlings, which are these little guys here. 1 or 2 1-foot tall duplicates of herself called Lornlings. They use the Quickling stat block. Each Lornling appears in an occupied space, obeys her, and it takes its turn immediately after hers. A Lornling lasts for 1 hour until it dies, or until she dismisses it as an action. She also has the spellcasting trait, which is the updated version. As you can see here, she has Detect Magic at Will, twice per day each of Create Food and Water, Polymorph, Remove Curse, and once per day Plane Shift. And she also has the bonus action of Swallow. She swallows a small or smaller creature she's grappling with her bite attack. They're blinded and restrained, and they follow the standard sort of swallow mechanics of you take acid damage. If you deal enough damage, you can pop yourself out. We have Endolin Moongrave. She is sort of kind of like, I don't even know, I guess shadow-based, but her weakness, the only way to dispose of her for good is to slay her during an actual solar eclipse or in the presence of a symbolic depiction of one. Okay. It kind of looks like the same stuff here. Still has the true sight. Pretty much the same upper stat blocks. Obviously, little changes in the ability scores, but the majority of the stuff is the same. Still has the boon of immortality that all of them will have. But she has Eclipsed Doom here. She can only be killed if she is reduced to 0 hit points during a solar eclipse or while she is within 60 feet of a symbolic representation of one. Otherwise, Endelyn disappears in a cloud of inky smoke when she drops to 0 hit points, along with anything she was wearing or carrying, and reappears 24 hours later in the same location or the nearest unoccupied space. I'm curious what a symbolic representation of a solar eclipse. I mean, is it literally just like you have like a light and you're like, put like your hand in front of it? Is that symbolic enough? Like the light spell on a rock? And is that enough? I don't know. Endelyn can't also be surprised. She has 2 Puppeteer's Lash attacks. You can see she's kind of got this marionette thing going. These are basically whips that can be melee or range with 46 plus 3 psychic damage. And if they're large or smaller, she can telekinetically move them 10 feet in any direction horizontally. And she also has spellcasting, Detect Magic, Mage Hand at will, Augury Polymorph twice per day each, and Plane Shift once a day. And lastly, we have the eldest daughter of Baba Yaga, Skabatha Nightshade. As you can see here, she is riding that rocking horse we were just talking about. So her weakness is she forgets the first creature she sees when she awakens after a long rest. I don't know how that's going to be super useful, but we'll see. Same kind of upper stat blocks here, Bond of Immortality. The first creature that Skabatha sees after she finishes a long rest is invisible to her. She can't remember seeing the creature or perceive it using her true sight until the end of her next long rest. So I guess that could be a strategic move if you would find that out in the course of your adventure. Choose who you want, maybe your rogue or somebody with super high damage, to be the first person she sees so that she forgets them. Assuming that you happen to be there first and someone else she hasn't seen someone else already. She has 2 claw attacks for, wow, 66 plus 4 poison damage. In her spellcasting, she has Detect Magic, Druid Craft, Speak with Animals at will, Polymorph, Remove Curse, Speak with Plants twice a day, and then Awaken and Plane Shift once a day. And then she has Alter Size as a bonus action. She can shrink down to tiny size or normal size. And then obviously the same things that apply for shrinking apply to her. So that is it for the Hourglass Coven. Moving on, we're going to move to the League of Malevolence. This is sort of the classic characters that we've mentioned before, starting with the infamous man who has changed the way Counterspell works, pissed a lot of people off in a lot of ways, Keleq, the Human Sorcerer. He's pretty much a basic sorcerer. He's got 45 hit points. He's nothing too crazy. He just has a couple of unique abilities and some magic equipment. He has Bracers of Defense and a Staff of Striking. But you can see his multi-attack is he makes either 3 attacks using the Sorcerer's Bolt, which is another one of these melee or ranged attacks, so it can do either or, which is an interesting concept of things we haven't really seen before. And I'm curious if we'll see spells or things like this appear in the future. I might make a separate video just calling this out, but see, it's melee or ranged spell attack, range of 5 feet or 60 feet, and it does 2d12 damage. So you can do 3 of those. 3 attacks using the Sorcerer's Bolt, Staff of Striking, or combine them, or he can replace one of the attack with a use of spellcasting. So he actually can do these and then swap it out for one of these spells as well, which is a pretty powerful turn. He also has, again, the infamous Fiery Explosion, which is essentially Fireball, but non-counterspellable, and recharges on a 4 to 6. And then, again, he has his spellcasting of Light, Mage Hand, Prestidigitation at will, Dominate, Beast, Fly, Mirror, Image, and Web once per day. And he also has a reaction of Arcane Defense 3 times per day, which is essentially a shield spell, but not quantified as a shield spell. But because it's not shield, it also doesn't mean it blocks magic missiles. So he would take the full brunt of damage from a magic missile. Then we have, I think it's Skyla here. She is a warlock, and kind of in a similar vein, again, a League of Malevolence here. She is much significantly weaker in a lot of ways, but she does wield the Eldritch Staff, which is one of the new magic items that we talked about in my magic item video for this book. She can make 2 attacks with her staff or replace one with her use of spellcasting. We can see it does bludgeoning damage, and then she can expend charges to deal extra lightning damage. And then she has once per day each of Detect Magic, Disguise Self, Fairy Fire, Fly, Hypnotic Pattern, Invisibility, and Mage Armor. And then she also has the Eldritch Escape ability, which comes from the Eldritch Staff. When we have Warduke himself here, just kind of basically like a fighter, for lack of a better term. He has some cool gear. He has a Flame Tongue Longsword and a Dread Helm. The Dread Helm is just a common magic item from Xanathar's Guide that just makes your eyes glow red when you wear it. And he can make 3 Flame Tongue or Dagger attacks. And his Flame Tongue, it's just a regular longsword with the Flame Tongue ability doing extra fire damage, and he just has a dagger. The bonus action he can use to ignite the flame or use Second Wind to get 13 hit points back. He's kind of a throwaway, not like... I don't know the super... Like, I'm not super versed on the history of Warduke, but this guy's kind of a pushover. Then we have Zarak, who is, looks like an assassin, an orc assassin, which is an interesting combination. He does have a potion of invisibility on him. He can make 2 dagger attacks, which do d4 plus 3 piercing, plus 2d4 if the target is a creature that... It does an extra 2d4 piercing damage if the target is a creature and Zarak has at least 18 hit points, so more than half. He also has a Garrote for, I would think, for suffocation, but it says 2d4 plus 3 slashing damage, and the target is grappled. Until the grapple ends, the target takes 2d4 plus 3 slashing damage at the start of each of its turn, and Zarak can't grapple another creature or use Assassin's Whim. Assassin's Whim is basically a cutting action, so he can dash, disengage, or hide as a bonus action, and then Uncanny Dodge as a reaction. So he actually doesn't have sneak attack, but he does some extra damage if he's above half hit points. And he has this Garrote, which is a new melee weapon that we've never really, I don't think, officially seen before. I don't know if it shows up in D&D Beyond anywhere else as a magic item or an item that you can choose to use, but apparently it does 2d4 plus your dexterity bonus and slashing damage, and grapples the target if you hit them. Until the grapple ends, they take the damage at the start of each of their turns, but you also can't grapple anyone else. And it looks like it prevents you, at least in his instance, prevents him from using Assassin's Whim, but I wonder if that just prevents use of a bonus action. It's interesting. I like it. I want to see more about this stuff in the future. And we have Zargash, who is an evil cleric. He has Cling to Life. The first time he would drop to 0 hit points, he goes to 1 instead. And he has a Ring of Feather Falling that looks like a bat. He has a Warhammer. Doesn't do a whole lot of damage. He has a Deathly Ray. 60 foot, 40, 10, plus 3 necrotic damage. He has some spellcasting. Light Thaumaturgy, once a day each of Command, Gaseous Form, Hold Person, Silence, Speak with Dead. And then he also has Animate Corpse once per day as a bonus action, which is essentially the Animate Dead spell, but instead of it being a spell, it is an ability, where he turns a lifeless corpse of a humanoid within 30 feet to a zombie under his control. Animating the zombie requires concentration, as if concentrating on a spell. The zombie reverts to an inanimate corpse after 10 minutes when it drops to 0 hit points or when his concentration ends. And then we move into Valor's Call. These are sort of the quintessential good guys, the direct opposition of the League of Malevolence, founded by Strongheart. So we have Elkhorn here. The dwarf looks almost like a paladin, maybe a fighter. He's a +1 longsword, which you can see there. He has 2 dagger attacks or 2 +1 longsword attacks. But his dagger is, if the target is a creature that is large or bigger, it takes an extra d10 damage. Must be some sort of dwarf ability here. Then we have the +1 longsword, which once again has that it does an extra d10 damage if they're larger or large or bigger. He can feint as a bonus action. He targets one creature within 5 feet. He has advantage on the next attack roll he makes against that target before the end of his turn. If it hits, it does an extra 2d6 weapon damage, and then he also has a second wind. We have, I think it's Mercion. She's a good cleric, kind of the opposition to, what's his face there, Zargash. All right, so let's go back to Mercion. Okay, she's a +1 quarterstaff. We can see her wielding right here. She can make 1 Divine Radiance attack and 1 +1 quarterstaff attack, or she can replace one of those with a use of spellcasting. Divine Radiance is another one of these melee or ranged spell attacks that does 3d8 radiant damage, and she just has her +1 quarterstaff. She also has Radiant Fire, which recharges on a 5 to 6. She creates a magical fiery explosion. This is basically a radiant fireball. Interesting. I haven't seen people talk about this. They focus so much on Kellick's fiery explosion, but radiant fire here is basically it is a dexterity saving throw radiant damage fireball that she can also do. Hers recharges on a 5 to 6, whereas Kellick's recharges is on a 4 to 6. Her spellcasting then is also light, spare the dying at will, twice a day each, command, create food and water, cure wounds, fairy fire, hold person, revivify, and once a day death ward. Maliver looks like, again, like our roguish type here. Wears +1 leather armor. I also love the addition of the special equipment section in the stat block. Very nice for folks. Something we have seen in the past. I like to see this return. I like this a lot. It makes it easy to figure out who has what, so you don't lose that. They have evasion. They have multi-attack, 2 dagger short swords. And then it says they deal extra damage if Maliver has advantage on the attack roll, or if the target... So basically they're just going to do... Yeah, it's sneak attack, 2d6 extra damage if they have advantage or they have an ally within 5 feet. They have, while wearing the boots of levitation, they can cast levitate on themselves, and they have uncanny dodge. We have Ringle Run, the good wizard. He has a staff of power, which is obviously way better than the evil folks have. He can make 3 staff of power or freezing ray attacks. He can replace one of those attacks with the use of spellcasting. So the staff of power is just a +1 quarterstaff. I think it's a +1 quarterstaff. No, it might be a +3 quarterstaff, actually. And you can spend charges to deal extra force damage. His freezing ray has 120-foot range, does 68 cold damage. And then here are his spells that he has himself, and then he has a ton access from the staff of power. But Light Mage Hand, Prestidigitation at will, Charm Person, Detect Magic, and Sleep 3 times per day each. And then Banishment, Dispel Magic, Fly, and Knock once a day. And then the Staff of Power provides access to a variety of other spells that the Staff of Power does for use of various charges. Then we have Strongheart, the man himself here, the Paladin, who wields Steel, a sentient, lawful good greatsword, which we did cover in the magic item video, but basically it's a +2 longsword that gives you the ability to cast Revivify. He can make 3 attacks with Steel once on each of his turns. Strongheart also causes the blade to gleam with holy light. If he does, the target is blinded until the start of Strongheart's next turn. He also can just do that whenever he wants, and the target is blinded, no saving throw, and he also doesn't have to hit them with an attack. He has Revivify via Steel, and he has some spell casting. Command, Detect Evil and Good, Protection from Evil and Good 3 times per day each, and then once a day, Lesser Restoration, Remove Curse, and Zone of Truth. And he has a reaction of Protect Other. Basically, it's the protection fighting style that paladins can gain access to, where you provide as a reaction if you're next to an ally, disadvantage on the attack roll against them, as long as you're wielding the shield, which he does have as part of his loadout. So there you go, folks. That is all of the NPCs in the Factions chapter of Wild Beyond the Witch, like the Hourglass Coven, the League of Malevolence, and Valor's Call. Interesting stuff there. We saw a lot of abilities that we hadn't seen before. I was interested to see the various abilities that are melee spell attacks that are either melee or range. They could be done either way. There doesn't seem to be a difference in the melee or range hit bonus, but that also means that you won't have disadvantage when fighting in melee using these abilities. I wonder if we'll see adjustments to spells going forward, or if this is something we'll see in 2024 with 5.5e or whatever it's going to be. Also, again, we saw the Radiant Fire Fireball, which is an interesting thing to see. This dwarf doing extra damage to folks that are larger than him. His Feint ability, I don't believe we technically have in the game either, that he uses. But yeah, there's interesting stuff. The Garrote as a weapon type. The sort of Orc Rogue it just does extra damage. But it wasn't like sneak attack damage. It was 2d4. He was using a dagger, so it was 2d4 as opposed to like 2d6 like standard sneak attack, but it was only if he had more than half of his hit points. But it also didn't follow any of the other caveats of like a true sneak attack where you have to have allies or advantage. It was just as long as he's got more hit points, he does more damage. So a lot of interesting mechanics unveiled here. I'm curious to see if any of these will make them into future installments, future books, or if these will all just get stuff that rolls up in 2024. So thank you all so much for watching. I just wanted to point out, I said I was going to talk about what's coming up next. So I have a list over here. I'm going to wait on my race tier list. You guys wanted me to do like a tier ranking of all the different races in 5e. Obviously, we know we're going to have 30 races, possibly updated, a lot of them coming in the Rules Expanded gift set, so I'm going to wait till that releases to cover those. I am going to go back and cover the Deep Dragon and the Moonstone Dragon from earlier editions to talk about what they were as we prep for what they're going to be when they release in Fizzbands. I have a bunch of unboxings from WizKids and a bunch of other folks to go through. Some terrain and things to show off, a couple giveaways that I'm working on. I have a couple character builds that I wanted to show off, like trying to replicate the Dragon Shaman from 3.5 in a 5e character with some abilities that we have. Also, a couple D&D story times, like I said, about some funny major moments that happen in some of my campaigns. I got a couple book reviews as well. Yeah, I got a lot on the plate, so a lot more coming in the next few weeks / months through the end of the year. So, as I've said it before, if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. Feel free to ring the notification bell, although I have heard from a lot of my followers that it's actually easier to join our Discord, because I do put out a notification, automatic notification in Discord that if you don't have it turned off will ping you whenever I release a new video, and several of them have said that that's better and more reliable than YouTube notifications. So there is always, as always, a link in the description to our Discord server as well if you'd like to join. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.